Ever notice how nobody ever wants to talk about their finances? This show is here to try and change that. It's all about having real, honest conversations about the financial side of life. Think of it as a conversation with your friends, just if your friends are really good at giving financial advice. This is Real Talk with Atlantic Credit Unions. I'm your host, Mel Henniger, and today's topic is divorce. So when you get married, divorce isn't really something you think about. After all, the point of getting married is to live happily ever after. However, according to Statistics Canada, about 40% or 4 out of 10 first marriages end in divorce. Breaking up is hard to do for emotional reasons, but it can also be equally tough from a financial side of things. From legal fees to dividing assets, divorce comes at a cost. Joining me today, my guests are Janet Dyson, who has been through a divorce. And has learned a few financial lessons along the way. And from a credit union perspective, we've got John Burris, a branch experience leader from Valley Credit Union. Welcome, John and Janet. So Janet, I understand that your divorce was amicable,
yes.
But it was still a divorce. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, as you said, like everyone knows that you divide assets when you get divorced, and everyone thinks, oh, okay, everything's going to be split down the middle. But there are unexpected expenses that you don't think you're going to have. Like legal fees, that can be very expensive to have a lawyer on retainer to help you draft your separation agreement, those kind of things. And I think a lot of people don't think about the long-term impact of getting divorced.
Yeah, so can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what were some of the long-term implications that you maybe weren't expecting?
I think my retirement, like when you're in your late 20s, early 30s, you don't think about your retirement. You think, oh, that's a long ways away. I don't have to worry about that yet. And then all of a sudden, you've lost half your RRSP.
Right.
Yeah.
So John, is this something that you see often? 4 out of 10, the statistics aren't great. So, is that something that you see often with members?
Yeah, we do. And just like you said with the statistics, anytime, whether it's divorce or anything else, anytime that there's a life-altering change like that, we're very likely to see people because the majority of the time it affects finances in some way. Just like you said, Janet, in so many cases, it's people will come in because those things have changed. So it might, in the immediate term, be something where their budget has changed or there's not as much coming in each month, and that's the immediate thing. But then the longer term, so looking at, well, how does this impact my retirement? Can I retire as early as I was planning? How does this affect my insurance? Is my coverage still sufficient for what I need it to do? So those are things where, especially when emotions can be high during a time like that, it's not easy to chat about. Going in and chatting with somebody who sees that, maybe not on a daily basis, but certainly on a frequent enough basis that they can help navigate through that is really important.
Yeah, so Janet, did you have, sort of trusted advisors in your corner that you sort of consulted with to help you with that financial side of things?
I did. I did have a financial advisor, so basically he was like, here, fill out this paperwork, made it as easy as possible. So that, as John mentioned, there's a lot of emotions with divorce. So it was anything that was easy button was great.
Yeah, even for an amicable divorce, I would imagine there's still some emotions attached to that.
It's a major life change. You go through the whole grief process just like a death, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So were there some financial lessons that you learned, moving forward for the next time or the next the next serious relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I had put everything into a joint account when I was married and closed down all my own personal accounts, which when I came to get divorced, I realized how long it takes to reestablish all that, and spent a lot of time at the bank. And I think that's kind of taught me to keep everything separate for myself. I do have a joint account with my current partner, but yeah, I do still maintain my own account, my own credit card.
And that's something that we see a lot on and especially in second marriages, is those things going forward. And some really good solutions even that people in their first marriage can take and have really good lessons from. So whether it is maintaining some of that independence and having that joint account, maybe to put money into for joint bills that might be coming in, but helps you keep a real hand on what's coming in and what's going out as well, which makes it a little bit easier to adjust after as well.
Yeah, so for those who are just thinking about getting married, first marriage, what are some of the points of advice that you would give them about how to set up their finances?
It's a really good question, and for as many different people as you'd ask, you'd probably get just as many answers.
Yeah.
However, in saying that, I think one of the things that maybe gets a little bit of a bad rap because things are going well, and maybe it puts a damper on things, but is a cohabitation or prenuptial agreement of some sort. And the reason that I would say that is kind of one of the points that you've alluded to is you move into the next marriage, and especially where we know the statistics that people are even waiting for their first marriage now until they're more established. The odds that people are taking assets and debt into a relationship now is much greater than perhaps it might have used to have been. So if things don't go well or don't work out the way, of course, we would all like them to, having that agreement is going to be something that you're really, really happy that you had in place to protect those things.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have those really kind of tough, not fun life conversations, kind of going into that. Jan, was that something that you had, sort of thought about, sometimes when you get married younger, you're not really thinking about those repercussions down the road and things like that. So was that something that you had sort of chatted about, or?
Yeah, for sure. Had a very candid conversation about it. This is my situation. These are my expenses. This is my income. This is what ends up left in the bank every month at the after everything's paid off. I just think it's important to be open about it. And not a lot of young people are, and a lot of young people are carrying a lot of debt, and they don't realize the impacts of being in a relationship on that debt.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. What happens with debt when you get married, and what happens with debt when you get divorced? That doesn't go away.
It doesn't.
So what's that look like?
That's one of those things that I think sometimes doesn't get thought about as much, or that's almost kind of one of those afterthoughts as part of a divorce where you go, oh, right. Because it's in the majority of circumstances, you're going to get together with a lawyer, or even together if it's amicable, and decide on what the plan is for that debt, whose responsibility it is. And certainly my advice would be is anytime you're taking on debt during the marriage, that already be predetermined, that there's a reason for debt, and that you know what the payoff plan is, because balances that hang around, if that's line of credit or visas, are difficult enough to pay off when there's two incomes in the house. And if it's reduced to one, you can imagine that it doesn't go away that quick. So the separation agreement is going to stipulate whose job or responsibility that is for different parts of the debt. And I think the thing that comes as a surprise sometimes is that that's an agreement between the two spouses, but the lender doesn't necessarily have to adhere to that. So if you do have one spouse who neglects, for whatever reason, to make the payment that they've agreed to, it can cause a lot of credit issues, or for, say, spouse number two to have to go in there and make that payment because they know that their credit, they need to keep it in check. So long term, especially when you're trying to move on perhaps with another relationship, that can be a very constant reminder. So debt is one of those things that you want to have a very clear idea on how it's getting paid off before and after the divorce.
Yeah. What was the biggest takeaway for you? What was the biggest lesson that you learned?
Probably, as we talked about before, just maintaining my own financial independence.
Yeah. And so what's sort of the most common pitfall, John, that you would see, with folks entering into a marriage?
It's interesting because that would depend so much on the situation, but a lot of the ones that we do see are debt related, or perhaps lack of agreements, sometimes even when getting divorced, not having a separation agreement. So it can be kind of any multitude of things depending on the situation, but those are probably the most common that we see.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all the time that we have for today, guys. So thank you so much, Janet and John, for joining us. This has been Real Talk with Atlantic Credit Unions. We'll see you next time.